Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Musou series, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but basically in this series you are playing as a really overpowered character, typically taking place in olden times with more medieval type of weaponry, taking place in a war where no normal army guy has any chance against you because like one swing from your weapon and you're going to be sending about 20 of these guys flying. This series originally started with a series known as Dynasty Warriors, so this took place in old Asian warfare, so characters are typically using weaponry such as spears and swords and that type of armory. Hyrule Warriors, however, does not take place in the Asian dynasty. This takes place in Hyrule, which you may be familiar with because this is where all the Legend of Zelda games take place in. This isn't the first Hyrule Warriors in the series, however. The first one was just simply called Hyrule Warriors, and I had played through this one, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition on the Nintendo Switch, and this came with like all the DLC and everything like that. It's been a while since I had played this game, way before I was doing casual reviews. I think probably like 3 or 4 years at this point, so my memory of that game is a little fuzzy. However, I remember absolutely loving the first Hyrule Warriors. It played exactly like a Legend of Zelda fan game, and it was a huge collaboration between all of the characters spanning all of the Legend of Zelda games. So it was a really good treat for big fans of the Legend of Zelda series. This one is a little more focused on only Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The first Hyrule Warriors came out before Breath of the Wild, so that didn't have any of those characters. This one has characters only from the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which that in itself is arguably one of the best games in the universe. Okay, I might be exaggerating, but I seriously think it is at least in my top 3 as far as all of the video games I've ever played, so that really isn't that much of an understatement. The story of this game takes place in a kind of alternate reality from Breath of the Wild. For those of you who have played The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, that takes place 100 years after this big, huge war with Calamity Ganon, and basically the good guys lost. And Link was put into a slumber, and he is awoken 100 years later. He is exploring this Hyrule that is war-torn and desecrated, and there's not that many living things left because of this war just destroyed everything, and it's your job to go and try to make everything right. Well, in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, this takes place during that war, and after a couple of events that I won't talk about here, it just kind of branches off into its own parallel universe, I guess I'll say. So it's not exactly one-for-one lore in Breath of the Wild, but it is kind of cool because you get to see what this whole war was. You keep seeing these memories in Breath of the Wild and hearing these stories about this gigantic war between all the good guys, all the good races banding together, fighting this big evil, this huge evil army, and you always heard about this war, but you didn't get to see that much of it. So in this game, it's really cool because you actually get to experience it all for yourself. Kind of like in The Lord of the Rings, you know, all those big epic wars that they have, like the Battle of Helm's Deep. It actually feels like you're taking place in a war like that, just set in the Legend of Zelda setting. So if you are a really big fan of the Legend of Zelda and really enthusiastic about Breath of the Wild, you will absolutely love this game. There are a ton of different combat options. It doesn't exactly play one-for-one like it does in Breath of the Wild, but if you have played any of the other Musou games, you will be familiar with this combat. Basically, you are super strong, like I said, and the only ones that can ever really match you are other super strong enemies, and so most of the common enemies you will just send packing. After 4 or 5 hits, they're gonna be dead, and your kill count is in the bottom corner, and it's not unusual for you to kill upwards of like 1,000 enemies. So you definitely feel very overpowered, but don't think that this is just going to be a walk in the park, because there are a couple of decisions that are needed to be made here. Also, sometimes you are given a time limit, so you only have a set amount of time to do something before you hit the fail state. The best way that I've heard Musou games before are you are essentially like an atomic bomb. You are super powerful, you are crazy strong, but the question of the game becomes, where do you want to place that bomb at any given time? Like, where is the most strategic place for you to be? Should you be defending your own fortress? Should you be taking over enemy strongholds? Should you just be going straight towards the main objective? And that is where the decision making comes into play. There are a ton of different characters for you to play as. If you've played Breath of the Wild, you are familiar with most of these characters. Obviously, you can play as Link, you can play as Zelda, you can play as Impa, you can play as the Four Guardians. I don't know how spoilery going into some of the unlockable characters is, just because of how old this game is. I'm not really sure if I should divulge too much into that, but just know that you unlock characters as you go along the game, and I think by the end of the game you have a choice between maybe 20 different characters. And I'm not sure if this is unique to Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, or if this was back in the original Hyrule Warriors. Like I said, it's been a while since I played the original, but in this one, as you play through as a character, so let's say as I'm playing through Link, and I beat a level playing as him, then Link will accrue experience points and level up, and so it does have some RPG mechanics there where I can really build up the stats of Link to make him really strong. You also have different weapons that you unlock throughout playing the game for each character, and these weapons have different stats. You can choose to feed these weapons into weapons that you like, and that's kind of how you level up your weapons to make them stronger. So there is a lot more RPG mechanics than a traditional Musou game. As far as I can remember, none of the Dynasty Warrior games I played had this. But this is why I really suck at playing fighting games, at least in my mind. One, because I don't spend much time playing them, but two, I just want to play as everyone. I just want to try out everyone's moveset. I just want to experiment. Every time I play a new mission, I want to see what this other character is all about. Every time I unlock someone new, I keep changing my mind, like, okay, this is going to be my main character. This is the one that I want to play and really level up. And I'm constantly changing my mind, so I found myself really discouraged from experimenting because of this leveling up mechanic. Because whenever you go to a mission, basically how the level select works is it's this overworld map of Hyrule, and you can choose optional missions or the main story missions, and it will have a little marker saying this is the recommended level of the character that you should be playing. You should at least be this level. And if you do play as every single character like I was doing at the beginning of this game, and trying to make sure that they are all relatively the same level, you are going to be under-leveled very quickly. At the beginning of the game, this isn't that big of a deal, but near the end of the game, I found that even though I was very over-leveled with the few characters that I decided to finally main, I found that the battles themselves to be actually still tedious and take quite a while. So that's why I think that if you were trying to keep everyone the same level, you're going to have a rough time, and you're going to have to do a lot of grinding and repeating of missions in order to keep everyone's level onto par. Now, there is an option at this like a training camp, and as you play through the game, you accrue this currency called rupees, obviously, and you can spend these rupees to level up any of your side characters up to the level of your highest character. So at the beginning of the game, when I was leveling up all my characters the same, I wasn't able to use this training camp that much because all my characters were the same. Now, if you have a main character that you really enjoy playing as, I really recommend just playing as him and really leveling up this character. And then if you change your mind in the future, or if you acquire different mains, you are able to level them up to the level as your highest level guy. So definitely go that route, and I would stay only to about 3 or 4 main characters tops if you want to have an easy enough time and you don't feel like replaying these missions over and over again to grind up XP. You do get a lot of rupees, and leveling them up doesn't cost that much, but it is really easy for some of these characters to get behind, and those rupees can add up over time. You know, it doesn't give you enough rupees to level everyone up to your highest level. I certainly would recommend looking up player guides when you are trying to choose your main characters that you want to play through, because there isn't a strict like paper tutorial of each character, and they all play significantly differently. So it's not like, hey, this is how Rivali plays, and this is how you really want to be playing Rivali. This is the combo that you want to be using. There's combos basically you hit the light attack button, and then you choose to essentially finish your combo with a strong attack. And depending on how many light attacks you did before you hit the strong attack depends on how your combo lays out. So you really want to pick out a character whose combo that you enjoy. And after you watch the guide, maybe I don't feel like any of the characters were necessarily bad. Maybe just certain combos or playstyles that didn't quite fit me. But I don't think any of them are bad. Once you watch the YouTube video, a tutorial of how to play these characters, there is a right way and a wrong way to play them all. Now, each character, on top of their unique combos and special abilities and strong attacks, also is equipped with a Sheikah Slate. And just like in Breath of the Wild, your Sheikah Slate can do a number of things, like create blocks of ice, throw these blue glowing bombs, different lock enemies into this stasis effect, and each character that you play as uses the Sheikah Slate slightly differently, so that even adds more variety to the whole gameplay. I keep on forgetting to use the Sheikah Slate whenever you're fighting a stronger enemy like a captain, someone that you can't just completely obliterate after a couple hits. When they are using a certain strong attack, they will have a little icon above their head, and it's basically like, use this Sheikah Slate power in order to disrupt their attack, and then you can really get a lot of good hits in. But sometimes you just want to use the Sheikah Slate, even when the enemy isn't powering up a strong attack. You can still rack up a ton of damage, even if you aren't prompted to use your Sheikah Slate. It is only on a very short cooldown, but I just kept on forgetting to use it because you kind of get in the rhythm of using the combo that you are most familiar with, and you forget to use the Sheikah Slate until you're prompted to do so. It's definitely not as brainless as you would think. I've played some of the older Dynasty Warrior games, mostly on my PlayStation 2, and a lot of that was find the combo you like and do it over and over again. But there is not as much strategy as the first Hyrule Warriors. I felt like the first Hyrule Warriors was very, you have to be in the right place at the right time, but I felt like this one, the action doesn't necessarily take place unless you are in the vicinity. Like, your characters, like your friendly teammates, won't do any damage to the enemy, and vice versa, unless you're around. So I felt like it was a little more lenient than the first game, but there is still some decision making to be done here, and your fortresses will slowly lose to the enemy unless you run back there to back them up. But like I said, you have plenty of time to do that and go do your main objective, and even just explore, just kill a lot of the basic enemies if you're feeling bored. But against the main or captain guys, I felt like you have to actually kind of be on it. You have to be on top of dodging their abilities, using the corresponding Sheikah Slate abilities. You have to make sure to utilize your combat in order to get the most hits on them. But it's pretty easy for you to actually lose your health if you get hit by these captain attacks over and over again. There are a lot of stronger attacks. If you've played Breath of the Wild, you are familiar with most of the characters. You fight Lynels, and there's Hinoxes, and just all of the main baddies that you are familiar with fighting. And obviously, Lynels are the toughest enemies, and you actually do have to be paying attention. Your eyes have to be glued to the screen. Nothing can be distracting you in order to take some of these Lynels down. That is actually one of my complaints about this game, is I feel like some of the main enemies, the captains of this game, are too strong. Not necessarily in the damage output, but they have a huge health pool, and I felt like even if I was over leveled compared to the recommended level of the mission, it would take me a long time to kill some of these Hinoxes and Lynels, almost to the point where it got boring, because it was just dodge, 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 do my flurry attack, do my combo, dodge, dodge, and it would go on. Some of these fights can last upwards of 5 minutes, and you get at least like 3 or 4 of these main battles in every single mission. The missions themselves and the whole gameplay can even start feeling a little repetitive if you are binge gaming this like I did. I think by the end of the game, when I rolled the credits, I hit that just under 32 hour mark within a week. So I was obviously playing this game a ton, and you start to see just how repetitive this type of game can be if you are playing a good 6 hours a day like I was. Obviously, you are going to start to kind of see through the cracks and get a little burnt out from something like this. I felt like it works best in tandem with a different game where you can kind of take a break from this and maybe cool down and play some Animal Crossing or something like that. something to mix it up in between, because the gameplay itself does get actually pretty repetitive despite the variety that you have available to you here. Like I said before, you're not able to just play as every single character that you possibly want if you are just going, like, just hitting all the main missions once. It just it feels repetitive after you are playing the same characters over and over again, trying to do the same objectives over and over again. There are some alternative objectives that you can go for here, and I did get every single encounter on the overworld pre-credits. And so I felt like I did most of what this game had to offer. Some of the side objectives did try to mix things up, like, okay, this time you're going to be escorting this guy. Okay, this time you are going to be capturing these 3 camps. All right, this time you are going to be playing against this champion. They do kind of mix it up, but combat-wise, there's not too much you can do to mix up the combat aside from completely playing a different character. Another thing that you can shoot for is, as you were playing through the levels, it's kind of fun to explore. You find these, I know I feel like I've been saying this a lot, but if you played Breath of the Wild, you can look for these Koroks, so you kind of look for these little hidden things, and they will give you this Korok resource, something to look out for. You can also look out for chests, which will unlock weapons for your characters. I gotta say though, one of my favorite things about this game isn't necessarily even the gameplay itself, but the cinematics before and after each of the main missions. They look like they were plucked straight out of Breath of the Wild. And I can't help but wonder if a lot of my main enjoyment from this game comes from its ties to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, because it just is more of that, and I absolutely loved Breath of the Wild, and this is just like an alternative universe. The cinematics look straight out of that game. You get to see all your favorite characters again, you get to see all the Guardians. There is even a little bit of fanfare, I would say, in this game, which was enjoyable, and it's just fun seeing all of these characters interact in these cinematics, and like I said earlier, just see this war unfolding that you've heard so much about, and now you actually get to be a part of. So I guess this is where I start getting into the nitty-gritty about this game's performance. I did notice a couple of things that I felt like could use a little bit of tweaking. For one, I felt like the camera itself got stuck in the walls a lot, especially when I was playing as a large character or I was playing against a large character. Oftentimes my camera would clip inside of these objects and I couldn't really get a sense of what was going on. Sometimes when you are pinned against the wall, you can't even see the enemy, so you don't know when to dodge their attacks or anything like that. Sometimes even when you are trying to move the camera around, it's hard to get a sense of where your being is, and I don't know, I just felt like it clipped into the terrain a lot more than was needed. I heard a lot of complaints about this game and its performance on the Nintendo Switch, and a lot of people were saying, like, this is practically like a first-party Nintendo game, so it should be performing a lot better on the Switch, but it wasn't. And I'd say during my first half of the game, I didn't notice a thing. I didn't have any problem with it, and I was wondering, like, well, what the heck is everyone complaining about? This game is running just fine. And then I started playing as a couple of the new characters that I unlocked, and immediately I saw it, like, okay, now I see what everyone is talking about, because a couple of times when you have a ton of enemies on the screen and there's explosions happening everywhere, yeah, this game would hiccup and chug just a little bit, and it was actually pretty noticeable just when a ton of stuff is going on. Nothing too game breaking though, and I have a pretty high tolerance for that kind of stuff, so it didn't bug me too much. But yeah, I did get a sense of what everyone was complaining about after the second half of the game. I wish that Amiibo did more. I know that this is mostly a me problem, as most people, I don't think, collect Amiibo anymore, but I have pretty much every single Breath of the Wild and every single Zelda Amiibo. At the beginning of this video, I'm sure I will show it to you. And I just wish that the Amiibo did more. Basically, you can scan 5 a day and they will give you a very minuscule reward. If you scan a Zelda Amiibo, it will unlock a very weak weapon for that corresponding character. So if I scan like a Zelda Amiibo, it'll give me a really weak Zelda weapon. And if I scan a generic amiibo, then it will give me a little bit of like resources that you can get at the beginning of the game. So nothing exciting there. And I know this is just a me problem. I just wish that they did more, maybe like an alternative costume, or at least like have the weapons scale with what level my characters are at. I don't know how hard something like that would be to implement. You can, however, unlock alternative costumes for Link as you play through the game and you are doing these alternative missions. You unlock certain gear that you unlock while playing through Breath of the Wild. I didn't find this exciting though, because I'd never really played as Link. In my opinion, Link is one of the most straightforward and therefore bare bones character to play as. So, I maybe it would have been cool to get some alternative costumes for other characters. I don't know how hard that would have been to implement because there are just so many of them, and obviously they all have different like body shapes. Other than that, though, I felt like the game ran fine, and I had a actually great time playing through it. I never had any hard crashes either, which if you played the game as long as I did, like I said, 32 hours, most games were bound to have a game crash at least once, but nope, never this game. It never kicked me out. I know it seems like 32 hours is a lot of time to put into a game, but after I played through the credits, there were a ton of extra missions for me to play through. I know that there is also a corresponding DLC that is rolling out in different waves. I'm not sure if the first wave has come out yet or not, but if you are looking for a deserted island game to play to keep your attention for quite a long time, this is definitely a game that you might want to look at. This or the first Hyrule Warriors, which I also really enjoyed. And then, yeah, after the credits, just all of these extra markers came on the overworld that I could potentially play through. I bet I could easily squeeze out another 15 hours of this game if I really wanted to, but the 32 hours is a little more than I usually like to put into my games. I definitely, don't get me wrong though, I definitely don't regret putting that much time into a game, and the whole time I'm just thinking to myself like, man, maybe I should play Breath of the Wild again, because I've only played through it once, and that was at launch. So when was that? Probably 4 to 5 years ago is when the Switch and Breath of the Wild came out. Or, you know what would be even better? Let's get Breath of the Wild 2 out already. I am so hyped for that, especially now after playing through Hyrule Warriors. The hype train is real, and I am just ready to see more of that sequel. Overall, I think I will give this game a 4 out of 5. Whether that enjoyment came from its ties to Breath of the Wild or not, I'm not sure. I definitely like the original Hyrule Warriors more than this one, just because it was such like this fanfare of all. It's like a huge celebration of Legend of Zelda, whereas this one's just more focused on this one game. I also just felt like there was a little more to the first Hyrule Warriors, a little more strategy to it. But I did really enjoy this game, and if you are a huge fan of Breath of the Wild, definitely check this game out. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you think about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, or the first Hyrule Warriors, or Breath of the Wild, or heck, let's just say Legend of Zelda. Let's just talk and geek out about our favorite series. I'll talk to you later. Bye!